here, following a winter wheat crop on a fairly strong clay content soil. So this would be 35 to 40% clay in here, calcareous clay subsoil. We've got 4 digs here looking at no cover crop, which is at the top of the field, where Jeff has applied, I think, 4 rakings now, Jeff?
4 rakings, yeah.
Yeah, 4 rakings been applied to this area. So there's nothing at the moment going on from a root point of view in the lower profile of the soil. We've then got these 4 spits that we've dug out with a spade here from this area. This one predominantly looking at the buckwheat impact on the soil. This one here, we've got a mixture of radish and buckwheat working in there. This next bit we're looking at the real influence of Phacelia working in that area, and then the one at the far end we were looking at linseed, but there's also a bit of buckwheat and an oilseed rape plant in there as well, a volunteer oilseed rape plants, of which we have several in here. And you can see wherever we've got a cover crop compared to where we've got no cover crop in the lower profile, this is quite blocky. The structure's still good, it's full of wormholes, but it's really quite blocky. But as soon as we get into where the cover crops are working, and we've got a 7-way species mix of cover crops in here, we can see that the soil is really friable all the way through to depth. It's subtly different, so the radish does produce a slightly more blocky effect, but masses of root in there, and this is why we don't want to just go with something like radish. We want to build friability in the soil. We need buckwheat for that, linseed for that, Phacelia and our legumes in there to give us the overall impact that we want. But this is, we're trying to build this friability throughout the soil profile. The other thing that's very noticeable with the cover crop growing in this area of the field is that the soil is now getting really quite dry. Obviously it's heavy clay, it's in Suffolk, and it has a tendency to grow a fair population of blackgrass if allowed to. So we don't want to drill too early. So this is one of the management's tools. Our biggest enemy when we want to drill later is having seed beds that are too wet. So if we can dry the seed beds out during late August and through September, they're in, but we haven't mucked the structural integrity of the soil up. So again, this has only been through with the Claydon drill. There's no cultivation to depth being carried out here other than what the cover crops are doing. But we can then, that can buy us several weeks probably of drilling time. When the rain does come in October, this soil will take that rain and wet up more manageably. We haven't moved a load of soil on the top to make a really loose, at-risk seedbed that will slump with heavy rain on it. We've got good friability throughout the soil profile. That's what we're aiming at. Over here, where we've raked it 4 times now, you can see that the rake still hasn't created a very loose surface that is at risk from weathering, but we haven't dried the soil out because we haven't got roots in there extracting moisture from the soil. Very noticeable when we stick the spade in. There are worms in here near the surface, but they tend to be in diapause, so they're all tied up, screwed up in knots in little caverns in the soil to retain moisture. Here, when you open this soil, which hasn't had the moisture extracted and is still a bit cooler, absolutely fizzing with worms right near the top, and big worms. And you open this up and there's big worms all the way through the profile of this. Very noticeable when you stick the spade in. Worms absolutely everywhere. Here we are in there, and they're big anesic type worms, which like to live at depth in their burrows.
Can't eat those, Baxter.
But you can see that the soil is another worm in there. Look, another 2 worms, 3 worms in there. Enjoying this cooler, moister soil compared to this warmer. It's very noticeable this soil is much warmer and drier where the roots have been growing. But if it comes wet in October, as it frequently does, it's amongst our wettest months, this is going to give us those few extra weeks of drilling time as that soil re-wets. One of the things you'll notice about the cover crop in general is 7 species in here, so that we're having these different impacts and so that we're not running the risk of not establishing a good cover because we happen to have picked the wrong species. It is not overly thick. We have not got massive ground cover. Even so, the roots are spreading through the soil and the entire soil is absolutely full of root systems. So again, because it's not overly thick, we've got sun and wind getting into the surface to dry it if it does come wetter, which it will inevitably do later in the autumn. But also it doesn't interfere with the drilling operation. Most drills that you would use, and particularly with things like strip till and Claydon system, the drill will fly through this, absolutely no problem whatsoever, in pretty much any configuration that you're running. So you know, we're trying to get the logistics right, do a good job in the soil, and make sure that we're not putting in a problem for the grower going down the line.